The Skoda Octavia. You know, and I know, it's basically a Volkswagen Golf that's wearing a sensible pair of trousers. It's the thinking man's Golf, but thanks to that saloon car body, most people don't think of it as a proper hatchback.
Which is exactly why Skoda has launched this. It's called the Scala, and it not only replaces the hatefully dull Skoda Rapid Spaceback, but it's also a more conventional rival to the likes of the Golf, the Ford Focus, the Vauxhall Astra, the Mazda 3 and the Kia Ceed, and so on and so forth. But is this car really a rival to those cars, or is it just a little bit dull and a bit too average? Well, that's what I'm going to find out in this in-depth review. But before I start, make sure you subscribe to the channel, switch on those notifications and leave your comments below.
Let's start with the styling. Now this is always subjective, but in my mind it looks way better than the old Rapid, especially with its spaced out Skoda badge at the back and boomerang rear lights. You can even have scrolling rear indicators on some models, but park a Mazda 3 next to it and the Scala will look rather plain, and go for some more wheels and it can look a bit sorry for itself.
Inside, and it's a bit more interesting than you find in a Skoda Octavia. And generally speaking, the quality is very good. There's lots of soft touch materials used throughout the cabin. Yes, there are a few scratchy plastics like on the door handles here, and the door bins aren't flock lined like you find in the Golf, but generally speaking, it's absolutely fine. And in this particular car, we've got this silver flash across the dashboard, and it brightens the cabin up. Generally, it's a simple and fuss-free interior.
Being a Skoda, there's lots of cubbies. The glove box and door pockets are all large and very useful. And then there's the thoughtful Skoda touches, like drawers under the seats, an ice scraper in the filler cap, a ticket holder in the windscreen, and even when you lift up the cap to top up the washer fluid, it turns into a funnel so you don't spill washer fluid all over the engine.
Now, infotainment. SE cars get this 8-inch touchscreen. It uses Skoda's usual operating system, and it's very intuitive, very easy to use, something we've come to expect from Skoda, but it doesn't have sat-nav. Now, it's not a problem because the Scala comes as standard with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. All you need to do is pop your phone in, connect it up, and then you can use the sat-nav on your phone. One thing that is worthy of note is the fact that the Scala uses USB-C charging ports. So if your phone doesn't support those, you're going to have to use an adapter. But once it's all connected up, you can use the sat-nav on your phone. Now, SEL cars, they come with sat-nav as well. They've got a larger screen and they also get digital dials.
For the time being, there are 3 trim levels. S gets 16-inch alloys, a tiny 6.5-inch colour touchscreen, a leather steering wheel and gear knob, LED headlights and safety kit like lane assist and front assist. SE adds this 8-inch touchscreen, while SEL gets sat-nav and a larger touchscreen, a virtual cockpit for the dials and scrolling rear indicators.
Like we've come to expect from a lot of Skodas, the Scala has got tons of rear space. Look at the amount of knee room I've got. Masses of it. That's probably best in class for knee room, if you're measuring that kind of thing, obviously, if you're sad enough like me. And headroom's pretty good too, thanks to this sort of boxy dimensions, and it just feels very light and very airy back here. Unfortunately, there isn't an armrest here, but the Scala sort of makes up for it because there's some ISOFIX points down here which are easily reachable. We've got pockets on the backs of the seats, we've got good sized door bins, and there's also 2 USB-C charging ports so you can keep your devices all charged up. Round at the back, and this is where the Scala really does pull ahead of its rivals because the boot is absolutely enormous. Look at it. It comfortably outweighs the VW Golf's boot, the Ford Focus's boot, and the only car that's got a larger boot is the Skoda Octavia. Now, as standard, you get some little bits and bobs. You get these little cubbies either side, there's little hooks, there's a 12-volt socket as well, but of course you can add various bits of equipment. You can go for a variable boot floor for £155. That's actually worth going for. And you can also, if you want to tow trailers and horse boxes and all sorts of stuff, Skoda will sell you a number of different tow bars. We've got the foldable one here that just pops out there for £785, and it just shows that this car is very practical. Now, to show you exactly how large this boot is, let me just grab the Carbuyer suitcases, put that in there. the medium-sized one, and then we've got the small one. And look, it is enormous, isn't it? I think the only criticism I've got of this boot is the fact that there's no releases for the seat backs in the boot here. You do have to go round to the side. I mean, it's not a massive problem, but it would be nice if Skoda had thought of that. And also, the seats don't fold completely flat. There's a bit of a lip to haul your luggage over. But generally speaking, the amount of space you've got on offer really puts those criticisms into the shade.
It's all pretty much as you'd expect under the bonnet. There's a 1 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine with either 94 or 113 brake horsepower, and a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol with 148 bhp. If you really want a diesel, there's just one, a 1.6 with 113 brake horsepower. The 1.5 is the smoothest of all the engines, but I'd actually go for the 113 brake horsepower 1 litre, as it's a nice balance between power and economy. Skoda claims 50 mpg, which is realistic, and it only coughs out a pretty measly 113 grams per kilometre of CO2.
We've got the 1.6 diesel here with a 113 brake horsepower, and it feels surprisingly punchy actually, but if you put the stopwatch on this car, it does 0 to 62 in just over 10 seconds, which is a little bit pedestrian, I have to say, but it doesn't feel it. And the best bit about this engine is it is fuel efficient. I've been getting 60 mpg out of this car, which for a diesel small hatchback is actually pretty good, and I haven't been driving it on an eco run, I can tell you. Now, it's matched up with a really nice 6-speed manual gearbox. It just moves between gears really effortlessly. Light clutch, light gear shift action, very nice indeed. You can go for a 7-speed DSG if you want to, but I would actually stick with this if the choice were mine. All sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Apart from one big thing, and that's the noise of this engine. Now, this VW Group 1.6 diesel is always a bit of a clattery thing, but it seems even more clattery in the Scala. In the Octavia, it seems quite nicely hushed, you feel as though you're removed from the growly diesel engine, but in the Scala you feel as though you're a lot closer to the engine. It sounds a lot more potent. It's slightly too growly in my mind, but I mean, when you're getting 60 mpg out of it, probably shouldn't carp too much. Elsewhere, and it's typical VW Group fare really, the steering is nice and light, nice and accurate, the pedals have all got a nice action to them, the gearbox, as already mentioned, works really nicely. It feels like your typical VW Group product, does this car, and that's what you expect it to feel like really, don't you? Now, one thing that is very surprising about this car is that it feels like a Golf to drive. Honestly, if you were driving this car blindfolded, and I wouldn't recommend doing that because it's probably against the law. Well, it is against the law, isn't it? You would think this car is a Golf. And the surprising thing about this is that this car isn't based on the Golf. It's based on the smaller MQB VW Group platform. It's actually a Skoda Fabia or a VW Polo under this car, and yet they've clothed it in a body that is Golf size, and yet it feels like a Golf to drive. It also feels as comfortable and as plush as a Golf on the road. Doesn't matter what surface you're on, whether it's a smooth motorway surface or around the city, this car is very comfortable. Now, it's matched up with 16-inch wheels, which obviously help in that regard, but it's very soft, very compliant, very nice. It doesn't feel too soft, it doesn't feel bouncy or wallowy, but there's a nice sort of pliancy to it. And it just sums this car up really. Nice to drive, nice ride. Oh, one other thing, the view out the back, great amount of visibility. This car really does feel 8/10 Golf for a fraction of the price.
It starts at just over £15,500, with even the top spec car coming in as a whisker under 22.5 grand. That's incredible value for money, and when you factor in just how nice it is to drive, how spacious and how nicely made it is, the Scala goes right to the top of the class, beating the Focus, Astra, Ceed and even the Golf. Click the video window on the left for my Ford Focus review. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.